Many of you know, and I'm sure people who have or have heard, have not watched the video or have watched the video of the murder of George Floyd. I remember waking up to this video of this Minnesota police officer. And this is before the video of the other video where they showed him handcuffed walking. The video that I was first introduced to was the video with George on his belly, which seemed like it was an encounter with two cops. I didn't see the other two cops on the other side until after everything had transpired. But I remember watching this cop with his knee in George's throat. And all I can remember is his pleas. That was piercing. It was piercing. Please, I can't breathe. And this went on for minutes. This wasn't just 30 seconds. This wasn't just a minute. This was several minutes that this went on. I continued to watch the video. I saw the people pleading with the police. I saw the plead with people that was watching to let George up because he couldn't breathe. And then there was screams of his nose is bleeding. And as you watch this video, you notice the nonchalant behavior of this cop that continued to press his knee in this man's throat, defying the pleas of all the people, including George himself. Could you imagine for yourself, if that was you, how you would feel? Could you imagine for just a moment the thought, I'm about to die? Can you imagine? And then knowing that your life is about to be over. How would that make you feel? Or have you even thought that far? So I believe we're at really a crossroads where something's gotta give. You can't be mad at people for being angry. You can't be mad at people for being upset for stuff that keeps happening. These are not moments that happen every few years. These are moments that continually happen in the Black communities. And you wonder why Blacks are angry. Why we said enough is enough. But the real conversation that I want to have today, because I believe that it's something that I could speak on because I lived it. White people, you got to have a conversation with your people. You got to have a conversation in your churches. You got to have a conversation in your homes. You got to talk to your children. Wives, you got to talk to your husbands. Husbands, you got to talk to your family. And the reason why I say this, because I notice a silence, even in my life personally, of white people. Don't have a word, hasn't spoken one word. Silence, sometimes people use silence as a way to stay out of an argument. But this is not just an argument. This is an injustice that you're staying silent on. Well, it's not my battle. Yes, it is. It is your battle. It may not affect you directly. It's still your battle. And I have a story to tell, because I think this story is very important. And maybe it will help white people understand. Or even get them to talk about it, to dialogue about it. And to even look into their own lives. And have this introspection of, am I doing enough? Or am I too comfortable? When I was growing up, I remember I lived in a all-black neighborhood like most of us. And it wasn't a very wealthy side of town, though I lived with my grandmother who had a home of her own, and she was helped raising us. And I remember this church bus coming by to see what kids in our community wanted to attend their church. And it was a predominantly white church. I think maybe when it was all said and done, it was when I stopped going, it was maybe one other black, maybe two, but we were the minority. And I remember attending this church as a little girl, and for me, it became an escape from my community. And so I looked forward to going. I enjoyed it. I had a good time, most of the time. And I remember going on to these camp meetings that we would always have these camp meetings, and it would last about a week or so. And we would go to the campgrounds, and they would have service morning, afternoon. I mean, it was like a revival. And I remember going in my youth, and I had this encounter that I don't think even after it happened that I spoke to the adults about it. I had this encounter. And I remember there was a service that was going on. The kids were outside playing. We had free roam. We was in campground, so we had a free roam, and we were playing and running about. And mind you, at these camp meetings, it was like churches from different areas. So it wasn't just our church, but it was just other churches that would gather together and have these revivals. And I remember being outside playing, and this young white boy that had come with some family from another church. I remember him approaching me, and he said, "You don't belong here." And he called me all these names and told me I was black. And I need to go back where I came from, and I didn't belong there. I was not accepted there. And I was so young, I know it stunned me. Because the first thing that came in my mind is we're on a camp church ground, and this kid just told me that I was black and I didn't belong there. At that moment, I knew that there was something that I was not truly accepted. I was participating, but I was still saw as different. And I say that to say that it starts with the children, because the children become adults, they become the lawyers, they become the judges, they become the government. They become all these things that interact with minorities. And children are not born racist. They are taught racism. They are taught to treat people less than. They are taught that they are superior. They're taught that. And until white people have a conversation in their homes, in their congregations, even when their congregations are predominantly white, have the conversation. Have the conversation. Because silence is acceptance. Silence speaks louder than words themselves. If I want to get across to people that I don't care, I will be quiet. Because it don't affect me. What I'm gonna speak on it for? I can't relate to that. And maybe you can't relate to it. Maybe it just happens for those people, those black people. But you can't be mad when the volcano erupts. You can't hold people down forever and think that it's going to be all right and it's going to be a by and by moment all the time. You can't expect it. And even when you think something doesn't affect you, something always spills over. I can imagine privilege. And perhaps you can't imagine racism. Because it's easier to not to deny it exists. It's easier to play like you don't see it. It's easy to say, if they would only listen, if they would only do what the cops say, it's always if they would do this, then things would change. We have found that not to be truth. And to me, it's an escape for you guys to stay blinded. And it's an excuse to stay in your comfortable homes, your comfortable neighborhoods, and say it's not my problem. If I could point the blame and say, well, if you would only do it this way, then these things would never happen, is a lie, and you know it. I can't imagine those last moments of George's life where he was begging and pleading and calling for his mama. And to have a blatant, total disregard for his life. Where you ignored him. And then you wonder why we don't trust you. It's right in your face. This is why Black people have a total distrust of government, of policing. You've not given us anything to trust. And so until white people have the conversation in their congregations on Sunday morning, change it up a bit. Don't have your traditional services. Have a conversation. Have a round table. Then we'll start to think you really care. For 400 years, and we're still fighting the same old fight. It's not right that we still beg for equality and change in a country that we built on the backs of our ancestors. on their blood and their tears. But yet we still are treated like second-class citizens. Racism do exist. It's in your face and you still ignore it. Change has to come. It will come. I'm disgusted. I'm angry. I have no trust in this country when it comes to my Black people. So, like I said before, all volcanoes erupt eventually. So until white people acknowledge their sin, United States is going to suffer if they don't get on board and say, okay, enough is enough. Because I'm a strong believer that united we stand, divided we will fall. This country will fall if they don't get their act together. His death was senseless. Ahmaud's death was senseless. There's no reason why anybody should be able to take that, have that much power. To still be free today, to still be walking, getting police protection. But where was George's protection? Where was the outrage and the concern for his life at that moment? There was none. Because cops have taken their badge as the ultimate power. Not all. But if there's any bad fruit in the bag, if you don't remove the bad fruit from the bag, everything spoils. It's not enough to say, well, that's not all cops. It's not enough to say that, because if you don't remove the bad fruit, the spoiled fruit from the bag, we all know this, it spoils everything. So if the bad fruit is allowed to remain, you're just as spoiled as the bad fruit, even if you still don't have any blemishes on yours. So I say white people need to have a conversation, a serious conversation. The churches got to have a serious conversation. And not to mention, we have a president who has not even spoken out about this. That speaks volumes. It tells us all we need to know about what society thinks of us. We have a whole president who has not spoken a word. I couldn't help but shed tears to watch this man plead for his life. I've watched white people in encounters with cops who don't get treated like that. I've watched a white lady about run over cops with her car, get out her sunroof and cuss them out as she was trying to run them over, give them the finger, and she still walked away from that alive. That's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about. When white people can do just as bad, do worse, and get treated better. That's the conversation we need to really have. I don't want to hear nobody tell me, well, it's not that bad. I'm sick of hearing that. I've heard that. Well, things are so much better for you guys, as if that's something we're supposed to rejoice over. We're supposed to be happy for. We're supposed to accept. We're supposed to be okay with the crumbs from your table. I'm not okay with it. I don't want your crumbs. I don't want your, well, it's not as bad as it was. I don't want to hear that. I want to see change. And silence is deafening. Silence is loud. Silence is acceptance. Silence is like saying, I don't care. And you may not know what to do. I understand that you may not know what to do. You may not even know where to start, but you start with conversations. We're not asking one person to have all the answers. We're asking collectively to have the conversations. But when you do nothing, you said everything we needed to hear. I pray for George's family. I pray for the pain of our Black youth. I could go on and on and on, because for 400 years, we suffered. And we still suffer. Because there's a group of people that wants to stay privileged. They want to stay on top. And the fear of losing that privilege, we need to get rid of the bad fruit. And if you're associated with bad fruit, if you're not having conversations with people who I know in your family don't like Black people. I know there's somebody in your family, and I'm talking to white people. I know there's people in your family that don't like Black people. And they're very boisterous about it. Your silence, when it comes to that, is acceptance. What you cannot speak up about, you've accepted. And you signed your name without ever picking up a pen. You've wrote off. You've turned your back. Anything built on sand will crumble. Anything built on sand will crumble. So, silence is loud. There's something you could do. Search your own heart. What can I do to help the plight of people that don't look like me? And it's okay to say, I don't know what to do. But first, we're going to start with a conversation. about your superiority complex that you may not even know exists. Your privilege that you've had the ability to take part in. Whether you say, well, I can't help what I was born to, but you can help what happens. You can help how it is used to keep people down. You can help that. I'm tired of seeing our black brothers and sisters die at the hands of people that don't care about us. It's old. And I don't believe we need to take several hundred more years to get the basic rights. I don't think we should still be where we are today. It's appalling to me that we are still here fighting for rights in a country we built. I could go on and on and on, but I'm not. I got up this morning and I prayed because to even deal with what we feel, you got to wake up and ask God to cover you. Just to even fight another day. It's real. And if you still one of them people to say, oh, it's not real, may God help you. How many more have to die for it to become real? Have the conversation. That's the main point of this video. Have a conversation, white people, with your people, with your families, with your children. Humble yourself, for goodness sake. Have the conversation. White pastors, have the conversation. Families, have the conversation. It's time. It's long overdue. And it may not be enough for you, but it's enough for us who deal with it regularly. We're tired. We've seen it all. We've heard the excuses. We don't want that anymore. We don't accept it anymore. We're not just going to turn our heads and roll over and smile and say it's going to get better. We tired of saying that. I know I'm tired of saying that. So white people, have that conversation. That's long overdue. In your homes, in your churches, wherever you congregate, that with people who don't look like you. I guess that's it. And I've kept it pretty cool. But there's a frustration, a disgust, anger. And we're okay. We can have those. We're allowed to have those. And nobody is going to tell us we can't be mad. We can't be angry. We can't say, we can't take this anymore. So